focus on the thing that matters most. Like what is the thing that you need to do, which in a sales aspect, if we were having a sales conversation, it's typically prospecting or revenue driving tasks, but it's very easy to get bogged down and focus on other things. One of the beautiful things about Stoicism is like there's a beautiful Marcus, there's loads of beautiful Marcus Aurelius quotes, but like, we weren't put on this earth to just stay in bed. It's like at the crack of dawn when the morning arises, like, ask yourself, were you put on this earth to stay in bed? No, you weren't. You were put on this earth to work. Don't take things too seriously. I know so many people that are worrying and stressing about business, and I get it. Like, but business isn't a matter of life or death.
Hey, Cosmic people, welcome back to the show. Jack Frimston is today's guest, and he is the leading authority on the topic of death when it comes to LinkedIn. But that is not saying much, because I don't think many people are talking about death on LinkedIn. We're a couple of the only freaks doing that. About Jack, he doesn't make money off talking about death. He makes money from a sales agency he's got called We Have a Meeting. In a previous life, he actually used to work on cruise ships. He actually used to be in a band and was quite a successful singer. But now he's in this more, corporate world, at least with the clients he's working with. But he actually talks about how his views on death have meant he's never gone into the rat race, worked for someone else, worked in a job he doesn't like, because he thinks, life is too short and why would I do that? So yeah, today he's going to be talking about mainly his attitude to death, but also how that relates to Stoicism. He's also going to be talking about his time in a Buddhist monastery. That's very interesting. And how this has affected him, his career, and made him a better salesperson and an entrepreneur. All right, Jack, we are going to be talking about the fun topic of death today. You excited for the show and our conversation?
I've been waiting for a long, long time, Michael, for somebody to message me on LinkedIn and say, do you want to come on my podcast and talk about death? It's always sales. It's always sales or cold calling. And you're the first one that said, do you want to come and talk about death? And I said, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think we're similar in that aspect, that probably 90% of our audience know us for sales, but then we do have this other side to us that maybe a lesser percentage it appeals to, but we like to discuss these things. So I'm looking forward to diving into it today.
Yeah, I find it's quite hard. I don't know if you find this, but I find it quite hard when I'm posting on LinkedIn and I want to talk about this. When it's written form, a lot of people will look at it and be like, "Oh, it's so morbid." Or I posted something the other day and was like, "We're all gonna die," and someone was like, "Oh, I bet you're a hoot at parties." But I'm hoping that the way that I talk about it is it shouldn't be miserable. It shouldn't be morbid.
Yeah.
We can talk about it with a laugh, because at the end of the day, it's coming for us all. So it's about how you acknowledge it and how you attack it. So yeah, I'm excited.
100%. I also think, obviously sales content, right? It can have a very positive effect on people and help them make more commission, be more satisfied in that job and all that stuff. But with some of this other content, I try not to focus on vanity metrics, because I know it's going to get less likes and comments and all that stuff than the actionable sales tips that a lot of people are on LinkedIn for. But I also think the impacts per person, like if you could change one person's view on death, or if they're grieving or whatever, it's actually worth more than like changing 20 salespeople's like sales tactics, So.
1,000,000%. And I don't know how it's happened, but sometimes people will be talking about death to someone that I don't know, and people will start tagging me like it's my thing, and like I've invented death, like I built a personal brand based around death. Yeah. But I promise you, I didn't invent death. It's just a thing that I like. But me and Zach were talking about this the other day. Like, there's so many people that get into sales or start businesses, and they're like, I want to give back to these people. I want to give back to struggling salespeople and stuff like that. And it's like, that's not what the industry like we do, but we see it as like a business. It's a commodity. But like, really, if you want to change lives, okay, and that you've got to fill your own glass first before you can start filling others. But like, if you want to change lives, don't start with salespeople. There's so many other people that you could go to Africa and help out. You could go and work on the streets of London. There's so many places and so many people that need help. Salespeople are going to be okay. So I know I'm in that game, but don't
100%. Well, let's start. So as I said, you're in a similar space to me in the world of kind of entrepreneurship related to sales, running your own business. I've worked in sales as well. Why did you become obsessed, to label what you called it, with death? Like, how did this happen?
It's a really hard one to trace back, but I've been thinking about this a lot, and I thought I traced it back to a point about 6 years ago. But then recently, we have a podcast, and we had one of my favorite authors on, and we were talking about his book, and I read his book when I was 14, 15, and that was a book about death and the afterlife. And he also had another book where Tuesdays with the guy's called Mitch Albom. He's got two really famous books, Tuesdays with Morrie and The Five People You Meet in Heaven. Tuesdays with Morrie is about a bloke that's diagnosed with an illness, and he's on his deathbed, and he's talking about his life. So I think it stems back a little bit deeper. But when it comes to like really, really, really think, I've tried to, especially thinking about this podcast, I've tried to draw the lines, and I was at a point in 2020 where I'd been in a band for a couple of years. I'd been in a band for 6 years. The band ended. I got dropped by my manager, my agent, and my booking agent all in the same conversation. So it was like, oh, right, that's a lot of rejection. Okay, what do I do now? So I'm going to go on the cruise ships. I'm going to start a new life as a cruise ship singer. I was like, right, okay, I'm going to go and do that. Started as a cruise ship singer. Then COVID hit. So next thing you know, I'm back in my dad's house, and I'd never lived with my dad before during the pandemic. And I'm like, what does the future hold for me? For the last 10 years, I've been singing. I was like, it's a pandemic. No one needs a singer anymore. And you start to think, and I started to read, and I started to follow entrepreneurs and mindset coaches and stuff like that. I started reading a lot more into it. And there was definitely a point in my life where I was like, what is the point? I think like most people in their 20s, I don't know if you've been there, but like
Yeah.
have that question mark that most young people in their 20s have, of like, what is the point of my life? I've got no purpose. What am I doing it for? And then like kind of having that kind of realization of, actually, you only get one chance at this. This isn't a dress rehearsal. And there's a famous quote that each man gets two lives. The second one begins when he realizes he's only got one, which I love. I don't know if that answered your question. I know it was long-winded.
Yeah.
Basically, too long, don't read. Always been a bit obsessed with death. Really nailed down on it the last few years.
Yeah. Maybe there was a time I had, actually. Maybe I can explain through it, and then you tell me if that period was similar for you. I remember being at university. So I grew up in London, up until the age of 18, always lived in London, lived with my parents. And then at 18 went to university, and the university I went to like had a campus. And actually I remember the first 3 months were quite difficult for me, because I went from being in like a city environment to more being on like a campus, which, even though it's like artificial countryside, it's like being in the countryside with loads of new people who after a few months I made friends with, but it took time. I remember just being in my room and like having loads of time to think, which I'd never had before. I always had my brother or my parents or whoever around. And then it just kind of hit me all of a sudden. I was like, oh, like, also because my parents are older than me, right? So my parents were like in their 40s when they had me. So my dad, I'm now 35. My dad is 82. My mum is 78. And I just remember being in my halls, and it hit me. I was like, oh, my parents are going to die at some point. And I just had this like really like overwhelming thing. And I was like, I'm eventually going to die. And it was just the weirdest thing, because it wasn't like I'd experienced a death, but it was this realization that we were all going to die. And I don't know like where or how it came from. But would you say it was a kind of similar experience you were going through when you were like, this was COVID, or like, yeah, talk us through how your psychology was.
Well, it's so hard. So we think about like when we're young, and like our first connection with death. But I was 4. My mum's mum died. So my mum's father had died before I was born. My mum's mum died when I was 4. And then I think as life went on, then I lost 2 other grandparents by the age of 14. And then by the age of 21, I lost a friend and an uncle. And all of a sudden, like, I know some people that have never been like impacted by death, or they've never even been to a funeral. I think by the time I was like 25, I'd been to like 20 funerals of friends, family, and
Wow.
stuff like that. Like, and it's just like that like you say, that realization hits you. My mum has multiple sclerosis, so that, like, she's lived with that all of her life, and that's something that for a child as well, growing up, you're probably
Yeah.
aware of, like that kind of thing. So I think I was aware of death from a long time, and I think because it's very hard, but it's always beautiful, kind of looking back in like hindsight. But I think because my mum had MS and it slowed her down, it
Mm.
prevented her from doing certain things. She was very keen to say, like, don't let anything stop you in life. Like, you can do whatever you want, but you've just got to work hard and put your mind to it. And I've kind of had that belief all the way through, that like you can't do everything. You can do anything, but you can't do everything. But like, if you put the work in and you focus, you can do it. So when I've got friends or acquaintances that have been like, oh, I could never do that, or I could never start a band, or I could never travel the world, it's like, of course you can. And I
Yeah.
think that I'm in a position now, a little bit older, a little bit wiser. I like to think that by passing on that message, if people are reading it on LinkedIn or whatever, they go, oh yeah, shit, we've only got one life, right? I'm not gonna do the things that I hate. It's like when Zach came knocking. So Zach started We Have a Meeting from his bedroom with 1 month's pay, and he had a baby on the way. And he got to a point where he was so busy. I didn't know if me coming into the business would work with our friendship, if I'd be good enough at it, and all those different things. But when he said, "Do you want to try it?" There was some thought around it, obviously, but it was like by the end, the decision was simple, because one day I won't be here to make a decision. So let's just
Yeah.
do this. And then through that, I've just lived by that mantra. And I think it's like taking those big risks in life.
Mm.
They're not always going to pay off, but what is the end result? The end result is always the same. So I try not to lay in bed worrying. I try to live quite a stoic
Mm.
life and approach that. But it's hard at times. But taking it back to that thought process of
Yeah.
one day we're not going to be here
Yeah.
is the most important.
So I think I'm making a connection here. So I wanted to go into this. So obviously at the start we talked about, yeah, you're passionate about this topic of death. We've only got one life. Now you're talking about how your mum was a great influence because she kind of never gave you limiting beliefs, said you could do whatever you want as long as you worked hard at it. I think I was quite lucky that I had parents like that as well, versus me like forcing me to go into the rat race or anything like that.
Mhm.
But are you saying that this this attitude of you only have one life, you are going to die in the end, is there some connection to that, like you can do what you want in your life as well if you put hard work in? Or
So it's weird, isn't it? Right. So people would say this guy's obsessed with death. That's his personal brand. He talks about death all the time. Really, death isn't the part, is it? I'm not obsessed with death. I'm like, death is just like the full stop. What I'm obsessed with is life. Like, I'm obsessed with the
Mm,
paragraph. I'm obsessed with the story. Like, I'm obsessed with people doing things that fulfill them, people doing things that make them happy, people not sitting there and worrying, and people not living the life they want to live. I worked in before joining We Have a Meeting and going out on our own. I worked at a insurance company, a sales company, and it was fine. And it was during the pandemic, and it was great. And I've still got friends there. But I looked around the room and I was like, some of these guys have been here 10 years. Like, they're not fulfilling their potential, and like they're
no.
all unhappy. Like, they're all really unhappy, and some of them are saying like, oh, I don't want to be here. It's like, well, okay, if you don't, I couldn't get my head around it. If you don't want to be here, why are you still here? Oh,
Yeah.
because blah blah, I've got commitments, I've got family, blah blah. I was like, yeah, but surely that's not a big enough reason. If you're unhappy with something, make a change. And maybe I'm a bit deluded or a bit like unwell in the head, but sure, that's the way my
Yeah.
brain thinks. Like, if there's a situation, what are you in control of? What are you not in control of? If it's something you're in control of, make that change. Whether it be going to night school and studying for 4 hours every single night to get a new degree, to go into
Yes.
a new career, do that. So that was a big factor for me. Like, going into this job every morning and being like, I don't feel fulfilled, but
Yeah.
like, biding your time. I knew I was going to do something, and I had these, and that's where I really started like reading. So like, I started reading and following call him what, an entrepreneur called Jesse Itzler. Do you know this guy?
Okay. No.
Um, so he lived with David Goggins for a bit. So, and he wrote a book about living with David Goggins, and I read that and I was like, this guy ran a marathon. I'm going to run a marathon. And everyone in the office was like,
Nice.
you can't run a marathon. And then I ran the marathon. And then his second book was about living with the monks. Okay. Monks. It's my accent.
Monks, yeah.
Monks, yeah.
Too much
Um,
time up in Manchester, though. So.
yeah, exactly. But he is obsessed with so he went and lived with the monks and like learned all about their lifestyle for 2 weeks. And I was like, I'm gonna do that. So I found a monastery. I didn't have 2 weeks to commit, so I did 3 nights. And I got up at 5 o'clock every morning. You can't eat after 12 o'clock. You do chores, you meditate all day. There's no phones, there's no all of these different rules that they follow. And it was the best experience, like one of the best experiences of my life. And I found myself in the library and I looked at all the different books. I was like, right, okay, D for drums or whatever, death. And there's not many books on death, as you can imagine, because there's not much you can say about it. But I started studying Buddhism and I started studying their approach to life and death. And I think that's where it really like, it's all of the, I've got all these things going on in my head of like, I want to live a good life. Why is death so important? And then from Buddhism, I started reading more and more about Stoicism. And then all of a sudden it amalgamates. And then you're like, right, this is,
Wow.
I'm obsessed now.
She said you went to a Buddhist monastery for 3 nights, was it? Or...
3 nights. I emailed them. I think I emailed 5 of them, and 4 of them said they wouldn't have me because I was just some schmuck off the streets. And some guy was like, yeah, you can. It's COVID. These are this was in 2021. They were like, but these are the rules that you have to follow. And it was hard. It was really like, I sometimes have a bit of a panic if I'm like, oh, where did I put my mobile? Like we're so connected to technology and our phones and anchoring and stuff like that. And then to switch off our phones. And at the time I'd just met my now partner and we'd only been together a few months. I was like, I'm really going to miss talking to her, but she was completely understanding. Phone went off and I meditated and I had I think I had a panic attack whilst meditating, which meant like I had this weird, vivid hallucination, which is people are listening
Wow.
now are probably going to switch off and go, whoa, it's getting a bit too hippie like for
No,
me.
let's go for it. So what were you panicking about? What were you hallucinating?
So it was on the second day and I couldn't sit still. So I was sat in this dark room and it was like, I'd done nothing and I'd been away from my phone and I just had to, the guy was an old German bloke and he was like, right, we're going to meditate for 2 hours. 2 hours to just sit there in silence with your eyes closed. That is so hard. And I was like getting bored and fidgeting, concentrating on my breathing. And then all of a sudden, like I went into this like weird trance state and I was walking through a field of daffodils, not daffodils, sunflowers. And I was holding on to the hand of a younger version of me, like a 6, 7 year old. But I was walking towards an older version of me as if to like hand him over, which obviously you could read into and think about what you want. And it was amazing. I felt like it's like crying afterwards. I was like, whoa, that's like a nice like analogy for life. Like you're just always carrying this inner child and we're walking towards that like final, what does the future hold for me? And I think like, okay, well when I am that man, when I become that 70, 80-year-old version, we don't know. I might not get there. Time's never promised. But if I do become that man, what would I want that man to look back on and be thankful
Yeah.
for? Like you read the book Regrets of the Dying. I can't sit there on my deathbed and say, oh, I wish I'd done that. I wish I'd taken that risk. I wish I'd told people this. I wish I'd so like I just live life by that. Like be authentic, be honest, live like tell people you love them, take risks, like do things like it can't scare you.
Yeah. Absolutely love that. Yeah, we there's a group I have called Cosmic, and one of the guys put on there the other day, it was someone that interviews like people who are like between the age of, I don't know, 75 and 90, and asked them like, what's something you've changed your mind about, or something, you would tell your younger self. And pretty much all of them said, don't worry too much about the material things, because as long as you've got a roof over your head and, can sustain yourself, worry more around your relationships with your family, right? And your health.
Mm.
And, it's like a lot of the things that you're talking about now. Though, is that, you mentioned the book. What was the book you said, Regrets Before Dying? You want to tell us about that?
Regrets of the Dying.
Yeah. What it is they say similar? What kind of things are they saying in that book?
Yeah, exactly the same. It's just like you can't. There people there like, oh, I got a safe job. Like I wanted to be a ballerina,
Mm,
but I never did it. Like I from a young age, I wanted to be a performer, a singer. Like, and I'm not on that path anymore. And I gave it my best go, and I got to a point
mm,
where it did quite well, but it didn't work out. And you come to a point where it's like it's making that decision like, am I ending this because, and am I going to sit with that on my deathbed and be like, I should
yeah.
have given it one more try. When you've been doing something for 10 years, like sometimes it's knowing when to quit and having the evidence to be like, if I continue this for 5 years, I might be deluded. This is never going
Yeah.
to take off. Like it's like, and I think it's like, if you're trying something, yeah, you've got to give things time. But if you're doing something and you've got no evidence that it's like moving a little bit, do you know what I mean?
Mm,
Like if you're young, play with it. You've got so much time in your hands.
yeah.
If you're older and you're trying something and it's not working, it's like sometimes it's knowing when to
And
quit,
to start.
which is
Yeah.
important. But I I will always I definitely will sit on my deathbed. Regrets is a funny one because regrets kind of insist that you could have done something to prevent it. Do you know what I mean? And hindsight is the beauty. I like to think that if I was on my deathbed at 70, 80, and I'm looking back on this period of my life, I like to think that like I'm trying every day to live the best version that I can.
Yes. 100%. It was a bit of a synchronous cosmic moment earlier because you were talking about David Goggins. And I was actually thinking about when you were talking about something, I listened to him on Modern Wisdom and they were talking around, often we talk about role models, right? But they were talking about like they use a different terminology, but I'm just going to call it anti-role models, which is that David Goggins was saying he grew up in like a circle of people that weren't really aspiring to the kinds of things he wanted to aspire to, but it actually was good because he was like, okay, I don't want that life. So he actually used
Mm,
it because you could have a victim mentality of, oh, I've grown up in this environment, I don't have any role models, etc. So I'm kind of doomed. But he took the opposite. He's like, okay, if that's what I don't want, what's the opposite version of that? And it struck, I'd never heard anyone say that, but it struck a chord with me. Because going back to your story around, you were turning up at this job and there were people there who clearly didn't want to be there, and you knew there was something different. And I also remember growing up in London, I have a lot of friends who did the classic golden handcuffs thing, and they hate their job, but they're earning a load of money, but they never have any free time for themselves. And I remember just thinking, that's what I don't want. That's 100% what I don't want. I don't know exactly what it is that I do want. And I was obviously on a journey in my 20s. But it's interesting that concept of like the anti role model. And that also goes into, I think, this topic of death and like, don't do something just for the sake of it that you know deep down is not really like what you want in your life. Oh,
mm. 1,000,000%. Yeah, I love that, Michael. I think like if you're 18, you can say like, oh, I'm messed up. My parents messed me up. Like I don't know what I want to do. When you're like 35, 40, like it's your fault. Like really, like there was people that I worked with that would be like, oh yes, like blah blah blah. I didn't get this promotion, blah blah blah. It's your fault. Like you've got to take like responsibility for your own life. And if it's not your fault, then it's definitely your responsibility. It's like too many people expect life to just be handed to them and they forget about like accountability. So like what are you gonna do to like get the life that you want and reverse engineer everything? People just go, oh, I want to be a pop star. Like, what does that mean? Okay, what do you want to do? Well, I want to do this, and this. Like, we're not even talking about manifestation and stuff
yeah,
like that yet. It's like just build out what you want to do. Okay, find someone that's completed that. What's that journey look like? Okay, well, I
yeah,
need to achieve X, 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 and X. Okay, how do you achieve those steps? Okay, well, I need to do this, and this on a daily basis. Cool. There's your first year. Go and do it. Come back to me in 3 years once you've done that every single day. But people want something now. It's this gratification that people don't know
yeah,
how to delay it. And it's like I'm thinking about like my career now for the next 10 years. And that's why like I post consistently and that's why I do all these different things. But it's just I had that feeling like when I first started posting on LinkedIn and talking about death, like
yeah,
there was that thing that oh, people from my old job are going to think I'm weird, and people that I went to school
Yeah.
with or people that I went to university, everyone's going to think I'm an absolute nutter. I was like, I don't care. I
Yeah.
really like at this point now in life, I can't care because I'm denying future me what they want.
Yeah, we've definitely been on a similar journey because I went through the exact same thing starting this podcast. And it took me, I probably wanted to start this podcast 4 years ago. Well, I actually started it a year and a half ago because I was like, all these people that know me for sales and yeah, I'm talking about death or meditation or breath work or psychedelics or whatever. They're just going to think this guy's a nutcase. But it's that knowing deep down, like, what is your mission? My mission is to help people. And I know these are vehicles that have helped me, and I'm sure they can be helping other people as well.
Mm,
Oh,
mm. 1 million%, Michael. I think we're very aligned, and I'm sure if we were in a pub, we'd. You know what? I think that these are the conversations that me and my male friends have. Yet I don't hear. Obviously, I follow modern wisdom and things like that, but
yeah.
like you don't hear lots and lots of men having those conversations. Like I've just booked this November to go on a men's wellness retreat with one of
Oh,
my friends,
nice.
which is breath work, yoga, meditation, all stuff like that. And it's like I find it hard, maybe find it hard as a man, but like there's that line of like, oh, I don't want to be too like kooky. I'm not a hippie, like, but like that's the kind of as I get older, I don't drink. I've not drank this year, and all these things like you start thinking. I think we start thinking about the future, which takes us back because we start thinking about the future because we're approaching maybe a midway point in our life, and we know that ultimately one day it will
Yeah.
end.
Yeah. I'm going to throw play like devil's advocate a bit on some of the things you talked about. So you talked about long term, obviously, like long term gratification is always going to beat short term gratification, and that's ultimately what's going to lead to success. But I
Mm-hmm.
think when you look at death, if people do die, well, obviously everyone dies, right? But when you're thinking about, okay, we all die, there could always be like a nihilistic thing of, oh, well, I could be run over by a car tomorrow, so I may as well smash 10 pints today. And like, I think some people like have that concept in their head as well. So like, yeah, how do you deal with that type of mentality?
I think from nihilism and from stoicism, the messaging is the same. It's exactly the same in the sense of nihilistic is I'm going to die, where stoicism is like I'm going to die. It's just the way you say it. It's like I'm it's the lens you view life through. It's like I could sit there and go, yeah, I'm going to die. So what's the point? Or I could say I'm going to die. That's the point. But like I'm going to enjoy it while I'm here. Or I could be nihilistic and just be like, what's the point? I'm not going to enjoy it. And I think in order, I don't know if this is true, so I can only kind of talk about myself and my own journey. But I think in order to get to a very stoic approach of death and things like that, I think you have to have a nihilistic look on the world. Like definitely 25, 26, 27. Me and my friends were all sending each other memes about nihilism and death and stuff like that and thinking like,
Mm,
what is the point? Ha ha ha, we're all gonna die. But it wasn't like with a celebration. And now, like in our old office, we used to have on in big words, remember you will die. Like like I know that it's memento mori, remember you must die, and then it gets paraphrased and remixed as time goes on. But it's like we've just got to remember it. And like I've got a necklace that says it on. I've got a watch that I'm not wearing today that says remember you will die, and all these different things. Just like the more reminders you have, and I probably talk about it so much because the more we talk and the more we teach things, the more like
mm,
it ingrained it becomes in ourselves. But like I'm constantly thinking about it, and because I'm constantly thinking about it, it means oh, I'm not getting hung up on the little things, which can be
yeah.
annoying at points when my partner says I've forgotten to wash the pan. But like I'm like, well, there are bigger things to worry about. We're all gonna die. Annoying, but yeah, like life is I'm conflicted on the life is short. Is life short or actually there's loads of it, but we just waste it, don't we? We just waste so much of our life doing things that are menial and pointless. And like I was listening to something the other day and it was like that commute to work, if we do it every single day, it's just the same commute. There's no moments in that. So it's like, what can I do in my life? Like, what can I plan this year? Am I going to go to a new city? Am I going to go salsa dancing? Am I going to do something weird? I've done so much weird shit in my life, like really,
Yeah.
like just bizarre things. Like, but just do it and work out
Yeah.
what you like, what you don't like, and learn how to live.
Yeah. Interesting the commute thing, because this goes back to what you were saying earlier. I feel like most people act like sheep. And I think it's in society, you need only a few people to be leaders, because if everyone tried to lead it, it'd be chaos, right? But I'm actually releasing a video tomorrow talking about, if you hate rush hour, but you have to go into the office, it doesn't mean the solution is, oh, work from home, because maybe you like going to the office. But the thing, I actually don't mind going to an office, but I hate rush hour. I hate having someone's armpit in my face. So I'll go in like a couple of hours early, or maybe I'll do my first call from home and then I'll go in. I can still go into an office, but I don't have to like be part of that commute. And then I'm like owning that relationship, or making that commute easier for myself. And then people will say to me, oh, but like, my boss isn't going to let me go in later. They're going to be happy if you go in earlier, but maybe if it's later, then you leave the office later. You leave at 8 o'clock versus like
Yeah.
6 o'clock or whatever it is. And I think a lot of people have this thing where they feel like they just have to follow everyone else, versus thinking, as you said, we all got one shot in life. So let's make our own rules and have fun and do weird stuff like you're talking about.
Not everybody can be a leader, but you are the leader of your own happiness and your own
Yes.
destiny, and you have to be. And not everybody wants to be a leader, like Michael. Like not everybody. Some people, and this took a long way, a long time for me to understand. But some people are happy going to a job, working a nine to
Yes.
five, going home, and they feel fulfilled. They get their fulfillment from somewhere else. There's people like me and you that probably have like crazy work ethics and stuff like that. But it's like we've got that work ethic of we want to do everything, and I'll be sat there till 7 o'clock some nights and I'll be like, oh, I just want to get this done. But it's like not everybody wants that, and it's knowing, but it's like as long as you're happy with that, that's fine. It's
Yeah.
when you're saying I'm not happy with this,
True.
it's like, well, that's when it's time to make a change.
Yeah. Well, let's get into stoicism a bit. You remember you were talking about memento mori, which, as you said, translates into like remember that you will die. What are some of the things that you've learned from stoicism?
uh Attachment to outcome, which is it seems it boils down to Buddhism. It's like focus on the thing that matters most. Like what is the thing that you need to do, which in a sales aspect, if we were having a sales conversation, it's typically prospecting or revenue driving tasks, but it's very easy to get bogged down and focus on other things. And I think like one of the beautiful things about stoicism is like there's a beautiful there's loads of beautiful Marcus Aurelius quotes, but like we weren't put on this earth to just stay in bed. It's like at the crack of dawn when the morning arises, like ask yourself, were you put on this earth to stay in bed? No, you weren't. You were put on this earth to work. Like the same way that a bee is put on this earth to go and make honey, we're put on this earth to work. So, but luckily we are a race that can find pleasure in our work, and we have free will over what we do. And I always think that it's like when the alarm goes off, there was a long time, Michael, where I'd struggled to get out of bed. The alarm goes off, and yeah, it's not always easy, but like I'm very grateful to just be alive most days. And I know that sounds cheesy and silly, but I just like
Hmm.
something good will happen, and I've got a phrase that I'll just scream, and if I look down at a clock or a watch and I say it's like angel numbers like 1111 or like do you know what I mean, 333, and I'll scream. This is the bit that'll blag you. I just shout as loud as I can, life's good, motherfucker. And it's just like a little reminder to myself that life is good, and we get to live and we get to enjoy life. It's if you do it well, you can really, it's just fucking beautiful. Like it really is. But it saddens me that people don't have that perspective and don't have that outlook. And
Hmm.
it's hard when like bad stuff happens, but bad stuff's always going to happen. Without the bad
Yes.
stuff happening, without the shade, we wouldn't know
Yeah.
what light is. Like so,
Yeah.
it's everything is contrast. And I think like I say to my partner now, like I'm in a position in my life. I've got both my parents. She's got both of hers. I've got like all of my friends. Like I've been through a few bits of trauma, a few deaths and things like that. But quite right now, I'm probably the luckiest I've ever been. Like with
Yeah.
everything I've got, and I know that one day there will be a change to that because like we know it's the circle of
Yeah.
life. Our parents aren't going to live forever and things like that. And I just think like really appreciate these moments because in 5, 10, 20 years, there'll be a moment where you think, oh, I should have really enjoyed that most. So let me give you an example.
Go for it.
Because of my mum's MS, we go down to see her family every twice a year, 2, 3 times a year. We'll go down to see her family, my family down in Kent. It's a 4 or 5 hour drive. She lives up in Blackpool, and I live in Manchester. So I have to go up to come down. Okay. So I have to go up to come down. And when we go back, I have to drive past my house to drop her off. It's an extra hour. Okay. I was talking about it. And you know what? It can sometimes, after you've been driving for 4 or 5 hours, the last thing you want to do is an extra hour drive and it's a pain in the ass. But I think about it, I go, okay, that's 2 hours extra. Now I've had a baby, I probably only do that trip once or twice a year. If my mum lives for another 10, 15 years, I'll only do that trip 10, 15 more times. That's an extra, and the way I like to frame it is like, that's an extra 10 or 15 hours that I get to spend with my mum, and we get to talk and we get to have that conversation rather than thinking, oh, I've now got to drive another hour. And this is about perspective. It's like, what, one day I'll be sat there and I'll go, God, I'd give anything to do that journey one more time. So it's about
Mm,
we think about this. Will I have those regrets? Well, I like to forward think, what will those regrets be? What could they be?
yes.
And fix them in the future, and actually not just do the journey, but do the journey with gratitude that I get to do the journey. And I think that's just life in a nutshell.
Yeah. Yeah, and that the video I was talking about earlier, where people are talking about, regrets when they're in their old age, that was a big one of saying, I wish I'd spent more time with my parents. I wish I told them I love them, all this stuff. And yeah, as you said, it's being grateful for those moments and not seeing them as a chore. Because a lot of people do think that, oh, it's Christmas and I've got to spend time with my family and it's going to be a pain. And yeah, families are imperfect and we're all flawed individuals, but we also got to be grateful because one day when they're not around, you're going to look at things in a very different perspective.
Mm. And I think some people won't be. I think there are probably people that don't get on with their families and won't regret not spending time with them. Like, and that's all right. But it's like being true to yourself, right? And what
Mm,
you think your needs are, and like do things today that future you will appreciate. Like, and that's the thing. Will I? I like to think that on that day that I get a call, I mean, in 20, let's say 30, 40 years, hopefully she lives
yeah.
way past 100. Like, but I hope I'm not sat there like saying, "Oh, I could have seen her more," because I could have seen her more. Like physically, I could. There's probably always more that you can do. But I've had
Yeah.
conversations with her about death, and I like to think that actually I
Yeah.
do a lot, and we spend a lot of time. We talk once a week, and hopefully that continues. And if that continues, then when that day comes, I can look back and go, yeah, I did that.
Yeah. Talking of family, you mentioned before the show you got a 3-month-old. And we were talking about how, like you were saying, a cycle of life, death, birth, everything's in, interconnected. Obviously, all as individuals, sometimes we have our own mini deaths and rebirths, and we take on new personalities. Like you were talking about, you're a singer and now you're in the sales world, and you started making content. And but yeah, how has becoming a father like changed you?
When people say it's the most amazing thing ever, they are right. Like, I know that some people don't want to have children and don't want to have families, and everything is each to their own. But honestly, it's just continuing that circle. I feel like from an evolution standpoint and from a tribe point, that's where we like get our box ticked. That's what we're here to do. We're here to like inspire the next generation, and we're in 1,000 years we're going to be long, long gone, and we're going to be long forgotten. No one's going to be talking about our LinkedIn posts and our podcast, but that if we continue to grow the circle of life, then there may be like a little bit of us that stays on this planet that does good, and it has that ripple effect. It is a weird one because obviously the most beautiful gift that it is, what comes at a cost, like everything in life. And by having to say hello to such a beautiful new soul, you ultimately have to say goodbye one day too, and that is hard. And it's kind of like understanding like this is part of the circle of life, like you said. And I don't know, for anyone that's ever been around a baby, you'll know that one of the first things you'll do is hold them up like Simba and probably sing Sabenya. Um, but yeah, no, it is amazing. And just to, I think over the next, my baby's only 3 months old, so over the next couple of years, just seeing that wonder and that enlightenment and just the things that we take for granted. I know that they're going to see like when they really understand trees and water for the first time, and it's like we all need to be a bit more childlike and enjoy life the same way children do.
Yeah, 100%. One of the things, like, because as I said, because I'm 35, when I hit 30, a lot of my friends started having babies. And there was a lot of things I think they weren't prepared for. So they were always like, oh, I wish someone had told me this. So, and I do know some of my friends and their wives are, going to have a baby soon for the first time. So what do you think? What is like some of the things you wish people had told you about like becoming a parent?
I'm going to be quite annoying, and I piss my I piss my business partner Zach off, and I found it quite easy. Okay, and I don't know if I've got a great baby who just like is very well behaved and very content, or that's a reflection of the house they live in. I think expectations is everything. Okay, so I find it quite easy, but my expectations going into it were it's going to be awful. It's going to be the hardest thing in the world. I'm not going to have any sleep. I'm going to be dealing on 1 hour sleep, so that when I get 5 hours sleep or 6 hours sleep, well, my expectations haven't been met. So I'm kind of more appreciative, or I'm happier. So I think expectations for life is everything. Like, in the sense that the spontaneous nights out were better than the birthday parties that had been planned for weeks. Like when you just got drunk on a random Wednesday, that was always much better as a teenager rather than just like planning, oh, we're going to this nightclub on this date and you're waiting. New Year's Eve is one of the shittest nights ever because we always have such high expectations for it. The other advice I'd give to a new parent is it's not just about like it's less so about your relationship with the baby. A baby, as long as it's warm, changed, and fed, they're going to be okay. It's about your relationship with your partner and what are the expectations before. So having those difficult conversations early on before the baby was born, that was so key. And that was advice from Zach. And yeah, having those conversations, knowing what to expect, that when it happens, you've already got a game plan for
Yeah,
if breastfeeding doesn't work or if there's some sadness or whatever it is, you've had conversations and you know what the expectations are.
nice. Last question I'm going to ask you, because there'll be a lot of salespeople, sales leaders listening to this based on, both our audiences. Um, what are some things that your attitude to death have changed in you that's actually made you like a better business person, a better salesperson?
So rejection won't kill you. It will feel like it will kill you, but it won't kill you. So do the thing that you need to do, which is 9 times out of 10 cold calling. We don't want to cold call because we're scared of rejection, but actually cold calling is going to be what you of the future is going to be massively thankful for. To go out there, find people that need your product or service, and don't take things too seriously. I know so many people that are worrying and stressing about business, and I get it. Like, but business isn't a matter of life or death. The 9 times out of 10, we're not saving lives. Like it's business. Nothing needs an
Yeah.
email back at 9 o'clock at night. You're selling printers. It's fine. Have a laugh with it. Don't be so serious about everything.
Love it. I think that's a great takeaway. We'll put a link to your LinkedIn, social media. Anything else that you wanted to promote here at the end of the show?
Um, no, there's some exciting things coming out. Follow us on LinkedIn. Keep an eye out. If you want to talk about death or sales, drop me a message.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Jack. Really, it's been a pleasure to talk about a tiny bit of sales at the end, but mostly death with you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sales and death. That's life.
I'm going to have just one takeaway from this show, which is think about if you died tomorrow, would you be happy with your life? Because for me, that's pretty much summarizes everything that Jack talked about. Because he talked about those people who you could see had been working in a job for 10 years that they didn't like. And they're thinking, oh, in 2, 3 years, I'm going to quit this job. But what about if you died tomorrow? You wouldn't be happy with those decisions you made. So that's a question you should be asking yourself. if I died tomorrow, would I be happy with my life? And if not, make some changes. Think about, where do you want to go to, and what are the small steps you can take until you get there. That would be my main takeaway for you. I always say this, but if you can subscribe to us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to this, leave us a comment or a review. Really helps us, and see you next week.